Connie Husby.
Here.
Clint Moses.
Here.
Amy Riddle Swanson.
Here.
Charlie Schneider.
Here.
Ed Steyer.
Here.
Jim Swanson.
Here.
Tricia Thompson.
Here.
We have a quorum to conduct business. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Next item on the agenda, item 1D, agenda order approval revision. Does anybody have anything for tonight? Okay, moving on. Recommendations and commendations, and we have one tonight. Amy?
Me?
Yes.
Oh!
I get to do it this one myself. So. Certificate of Achievement from the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, known as WASB, presents an award level 5 to Amy Riddle Swanson for demonstrating a high level of commitment to Wisconsin public school students by participating in WASB professional development opportunities, dated October 2020. Okay, student rep communications. At this time, I'd like to call on Mesa Wilson and Madeline Clement, please.
My name is Mesa Wilson, and I'm one of the student representatives to the board. Oh,
Yeah, you can stand there, sure. You don't have to like bend down.
Okay.
It'll pick you up.
Okay. For our student report, we would like to share on the COVID-19 impact and just say that students are still complying with the mask and social distancing protocols overall. With students being called down to the office over the loudspeakers for contact tracing because of the phones not working has definitely added tension to the classroom environment, but is necessary. School has a very different feeling this year, but we are continuing to work on ideas to make school more normal, and everyone is staying pretty positive for the most part.
I'm Maddie, and I'm going to be talking about the internet loss impact on us this past week. So the loss of the internet this past week added difficulty into our days. With the push for having our learning online due to COVID, many things that we were used to doing could not be done without internet access. But many teachers could teach as normal. Others showed videos and provided other sources of entertainment until they could teach with the internet. Some students opted to leave school as they were not doing productive things in class. With Skyward being down, students were not able to check their grades on finals week, which was frustrating because they didn't know how they were going to finish off the first quarter in their classes. Teachers were not able to take attendance or put in grades, which added extra stress into their lives as well. The extension of finals will give students time to get their grades up if they need to, and will give teachers more time to put in grades. Some students already had their finals on Friday and will not have much to do Monday and Tuesday except get caught up for next term, but teachers will make sure that class time is still productive. Overall, everyone worked to make class go smoothly without the internet, and work still got done.
And then just a little bit about the sports and activities. So fall sports are now coming to a close, and many athletes are preparing for their winter sports season to begin. The boys and girls cross country teams just ended their season by competing at the state cross country meet, with the boys taking 5th place as a team and the girls taking 8th. The tennis team ended their season with 3 girls competing at state. The football team is scheduled to have their first playoff game this week against Marshfield at home if they are able to continue with their season. They are currently the #1 seed in Division I and are hoping to advance on to state. The girls swim and dive team had a very successful season. At the sectional meet, the girls placed 3rd, and at the dive sectionals, Melody Greenwood got 1st, Mia Smith got 4th, and Lexi Kronk got 6th. They hope to send 2 relays to state, and Melody Greenwood will be attending state for the relays, diving, and the 500 freestyle. And now that fall sports are ending, we've got a lot of students that are looking forward to the start of winter sports and activities. Thank you so much.
Thank
Is
you.
there any questions?
Any questions?
Dave, if you don't mind, I haven't talked to either of you, but do you have any comments on the plan for moving the high school to virtual for at least a couple weeks?
Personally, I'm feeling kind of bittersweet about it. I think there's probably a need for it in a lot of aspects with all of the staff, or a lot of staff members being gone, and it's definitely been a challenge with the lack of subs. I definitely see that in the building, and even the lack of students as well. But I guess I'm just curious to see how it works out now that we've got kind of a few months under our belts with March through May, and we'll see if this new plan works a little better. But bittersweet, it'll be okay though.
Thanks, Mason.
Yeah, and I feel like,
Just a second, go ahead first.
I feel like we're being more prepared this time. Like the plan, I feel a lot better about it, and I think it'll go a lot more smoothly than it did last spring, so.
Thanks, Maddie.
Okay.
Girls, I have a question for you, and thank you for what you added today, but being that it's happening in between semesters, do you think that that's gonna make it easier or harder?
Tomorrow, before our final schedule starts, we are supposed to meet with our teachers for next term, just for like 10 minutes for each class so they can get us signed up for Google Classroom and, you know, different materials that we need before we start. I think it would have been nice to have a couple of days with those teachers to like talk about, okay, this is how class is going to go, this is how this virtual model is going to run. But I don't think it'll be difficult. I think it's good that we're finishing the term that we're in before moving online, because I think it would be really hard to try and just do a couple weeks with the classes that we're in and try and finish everything up. Because I'm sure some of you have been teachers and know that sometimes units get pushed the way back and you're trying to do a lot in those last couple weeks. So I definitely think it's good that we're finishing the term we're in. But it maybe would have been nice to have a few more times to meet with those teachers before we went to full virtual.
I agree.
Yes, I would.
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah,
Thank you, appreciate it. Have a good night. Okay, community communications. I think we start off with the, we have some virtually that are going to talk here first, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Yes, we do have some virtual community communications, and we have offered this over the past several months, and this is the first time we're actually doing them virtually. We also appreciate the written communications we've received. We also have some people in the audience, Coach Labuda, Coach Lilydell, and Dr. Walker. We'll save your comments until we actually get to that agenda item, because I had hoped to have you share with the board as part of that agenda, even though some of this is related. But in terms of the community communications portion, we'll start with Jesse Singerhouse. And Mr. Singerhouse is representing the swim and dive parents, and he has some comments about swimming and diving. So Mr. Singerhouse, go ahead.
Hey, Joe, thank you. Actually, good evening, board members. Can I turn it over to Kate? Because I think it'd be important to hear from the team first, and I'll kind of back clean up on that and fill in anything that they missed, if that would be okay.
That's fine with us. So I guess we'll start with Kate Westfall, one of the swim and dive team members.
Okay, yeah, hi, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so first of all, I think we all understand the school's decision to switch online and go virtual, but as a team of 4 swimmers with less than a week left of our season, I think that we can finish up without causing any problems to this. And throughout the season, we've been very careful with our rule following, and we've followed every guideline that's been given to us. We've worked really, really hard on that. We've had limits to how many swimmers per lane, wear masks as soon as we got out of the pool. We haven't been allowed to eat on the bus, and I know, like, we've just been super careful. And the 4 of us that are left are very willing to do whatever it takes to get to finish up this last week of our season, whatever that might be, to make it safe. And another thing I'd like to point out is if there's a concern with going to state about, you know, just the amounts of people that we'll be interacting with, if we our last go, will be returning online, so we wouldn't really have that danger of bringing anything back to the school. But I think the most important thing is that, we are willing to do whatever it takes in terms of safety to finish out our season. It's really important to us that we get to go to state. It's this big opportunity. We've worked so hard to get to, and we've already overcome a lot of issues from COVID. Like our season was shortened in the beginning, and we still made it to state. I think it's just really important to us to be able to finish out this week. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Kate. We appreciate you sharing that. Do any of the other swimmers have anything to add to what Kate mentioned? Okay, then I will turn it over to Mr. Singerhouse, one of the parents of the swimmers going to state.
Sure, thanks, Dr. Sadowski, thanks school board members. I know many of you, and I appreciate the time, recognize the challenges that you all face, keeping our kids safe and educated, so I appreciate that. I run a business in town, and we face these same challenges every day, so I definitely appreciate the work you're doing. Speaking on behalf of the swim parents, the West Falls, Masons, Greenwoods, and ourselves, and like Kate said, their season is scheduled to end this Friday at the state championship, so we're not talking about a long extension here. The girls have done everything that's asked of them this year to keep that season going and keep their team safe, so we sure like that to continue. They've really earned that opportunity for state. This is a unique year, so to rise to that challenge, I think, speaks to their credit. They're good student athletes, and I think this would be a great opportunity for them. As parents, we've offered to drive our own kids to Waukesha, where they're going to have the state meet, if that helps to mitigate risk in terms of transportation. We're willing to do that and cover that cost. Practices, I think, over the next few days are critical to these girls. They're swimming, they're training their bodies for the entire season to peak at this time. So to not practice is really hard on them. And it is a very low risk activity. If I, as a parent, if I thought this was dangerous for my daughter, I wouldn't be here advocating for it. We all operate with risk with COVID nowadays in our community, in our daily lives. We have to mitigate them. But I think education is important. Activities and sports are important if they can be done safely. I think that is a good balance for our students. So I'd like to see that continue. Again, with all our other activities that we have in our district, if we can have the field house open and the pool open and a place for community members to go while we're trying to stay home, but if we can come there safely to exercise or get out, I think that's important as you discuss that tonight too. So I respectfully ask that you allow the swim season and even football to continue and finish their seasons. They've worked hard to be safe and follow the rules, and I think it can be done safely over the next few days for swimming and the next week for football. So would appreciate your consideration of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate that. Okay, now we have a met full of community communications. What are we up to, Jamie?
12.
Well, I guess I would ask the board what their pleasure is with those. If you want them read, or if you want to look them up in board docs. Everything is in board docs for your viewing. What is the board's pleasure? Amy?
I know it might be cumbersome, but I would like to read it only because if they were able to come to this meeting or were able to come on Zoom, they'd be able to read or say, right, here, and I think it's important the community knows what everybody's thinking.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Anybody opposed? Or Penny?
I'm not opposed, but being that Jesse Singerhouse just spoke, maybe we don't necessarily.
Yeah, I think we could take
his, but
Jesse's on.
yeah, I think we can take that up, and I'm up for
Okay.
any of that.
Jamie?
Dave, if I could just mention, I know that Jesse also mentioned he was speaking on behalf of the other swim parents. So that would include Jill Greenwood, Noah Westfall, and I think that's it from this list. Oh, and Jesse Singerhouse.
Unless anyone brought up a point that he didn't.
Okay.
Anything that any board member saw, I'm all about being brief, but if there was something else they pointed out, I don't know if any other board members saw that.
those are pretty short, the Greenwood is pretty short, so I guess we can just go ahead and read them.
Great.
Is that okay with everybody? Okay.
All right, the first one I have is from Jill Greenwood. I'm contacting you to advocate for the student athletes that have earned the opportunity to compete at the state swimming and diving meet this weekend and for them to have use of the pool to practice. It is my understanding that the reason for a change to distance learning was in response to ill teachers. I cannot see how this would affect student athletes competing at state. We have healthy coaches and athletes ready to compete. Bruce and I intend to drive Melody to the meet ourselves, limiting contact rather than a bus or van situation. It would be a great relief to athletes and parents know that our daughter's years of hard work and high levels of achievement result in their being able to attend this important meet. Next one is from Nola Westfall. She writes this to, it seems like I've been emailing you a lot. Believe me, I've never contacted the district administrator before this year. Not my cup of tea getting involved. My daughter Kate and 3 others made it to state swim in 4 events, and the whole sectional team did awesome Saturday. The team placed 3rd. This team has been amazing, cohesive, flexible, and followed all the required ever-changing COVID protocols. They're all good students. 2 are seniors and have been cheated out of so many things already. They have worked so hard. I'm wondering why their practice was canceled today. Your email stated that this was a staffing issue, not a spike in student cases. There are only 4 girls practicing now, and I'm assuming the swim coaches' staff are healthy. That would be even easier to follow COVID protocol with only 4 athletes in the pool, with germ-killing chlorine. For state, parents are willing to drive their kids to the meet and get separate hotel rooms. They need to compete this season just like the other fall sports. Cross country is allowed to go to state, swim parents can make this work. And if there's a potential exposure, they aren't going back to school on Monday anyway, and the swim season is over. By the way, Kate was accepted to Wheaton University in Illinois for the spring semester, $12,000 per year presidential scholarship. Thanks, she is very excited and has at least one bright thing to look forward to. So I think she and the other 3 athletes can handle state meet rules. This will be Kate's 3rd state swim events, Melody's 4th state trip, and Kinsey's 2nd state and Shannon's 1st. Kate and Melody are captains and are good leaders and will help the younger athletes. They have followed all this year's COVID rules to the letter, and they didn't want to risk missing their chance at state. I would be very disappointed. It would be very disappointing if they can't go due to staffing issues and they need to practice this week. Muscle is lost every day without swimming. Thanks, Nola. Next one is from Mike Brewer. It would be an absolute travesty to cut these sports seasons short for the kids who have battled through this adversity. Staff impacts are not the student athlete's fault, and as we have seen, the player-to-player contact and transmission has been held in check. It is my understanding there are several other fully virtual districts allowing student athlete participation. Personally, we follow the football program. They have 7 practices and 2 games remaining. There should be no decision made by the board that takes that away from them. I trust we hear the same thing from the majority of rational people in our community. The next one is from Tiana Glenna, and I apologize if I pronounce your names wrong. My name is Tiana Glenna, and I have twin boys who are sophomores at MHS. Our boys play football and hockey through the school district. I'm writing to request your support of continuing winter sports at the high school. The hockey rink has been up and running with strict guidelines in place to reduce the exposure to COVID-19. We received support from the county to open the facility for hockey, and our youth board president is in discussions with county health director monthly to update on the restrictions and make modifications if required. Playing high school sports is very crucial to the mental health of the students, and I request your support and the rest of the school board to please consider allowing winter sports to continue. The athletes want to play and are already following the guidelines and restrictions that are in place at the hockey rink and will continue to do so if they are allowed to play. We signed our boys up with the NYAH hockey when they were 4 years old. Any parent of an athlete can appreciate the time and effort that goes into supporting your child in any sport. If you are not a parent of an athlete or an athlete growing up, then this may be hard for you to understand the importance of continuing the sports season. This decision is not only represented by an athlete's parent, but through the actions of our student athletes. Our MHS hockey received an award last year for holding the highest GPA in our conference. This is where the dedication of the student athletes come into play. It is not just about the game itself, but the dedication to the continuity of family education and sports. Many of our players have put in many hours on the field, ice rink, and off over the summer in preparation for this upcoming season. Taking this away from the kids at this time will destroy their emotional and athletic stability for the years to come. My child told me this morning, we were to have practice today, but they again canceled it until the outcome of this meeting. What's the point? You know the season is done before it even started. I feel like a yo-yo because first we have practice, then we don't. Or are we having a season, then we are not? What is the point anymore? These are the words of a defeated child who lives for the sport. I had and have now tears in my eyes as I can see the love and spark for sport leaving my children. Sports and academics are what provided a part of their identity. Those are both being taken away from our children through the closure of the school, going virtual, which I hope is better than the end of last year. End of sports are discontinued. I know you have already decided to send our children into a virtual learning platform. Please do not take away this last thread they are holding on to. Please do not take away winter sports. The next one is from Christy Hendrickson. My name is Christy Hendrickson. I am the Vice President for the Blue Line Club, which supports MHS hockey. I am writing to request your support of continuing winter sports at the high school. The hockey rink has been up and running with strict guidelines in place to reduce the exposure of COVID-19. We received the support from the county to open the facility for hockey, and our youth board president is in discussions with the county nurse monthly to update on the restrictions and make modifications. Playing high school sports is very crucial to the mental health of the students, and I request your support to please consider allowing winter sports to continue. The athletes want to play and are already following the guidelines and restrictions that are in place at the hockey rink and will continue to do so if they're allowed to play. Thank you for your consideration. Next one is from Matthew Ellis. I just want to comment on the importance sports has on the mental stability of our student athletes. If these kids have to do virtual learning again, they will need an outlet. The depression and suicide rates are through the roof because of the lack of social interaction. We played 5 tournaments over the spring and summer with over 1,000 kids and had 0 cases. The Menomonie Youth Hockey Association has been running hockey at the rink for over a month and has had 0 cases. Our mitigation has been very good and strict. The county and KT have been very happy with what we're doing. This will be followed by all user groups. Sports can help improve your concentration and keep you mentally sharp as you age. Participating in a mix of aerobic and muscle strengthening exercise for 30 minutes or longer at least 3 times a week can improve mental abilities, including critical thinking, learning, and using good judgment. Here are some of the huge benefits that team sports can have on your mental health. The social aspect that comes with being part of a team is fantastic for your well-being. Even if you join a team not knowing a soul, sports has a funny way of fast-tracking friendships. Human connection is such an important factor in maintaining good mental health. Being part of a team adds a support network that you wouldn't otherwise have. Sports is a proven distressor. It forces you to apply yourself fully to the task at hand, leaving behind thoughts and worries you may have had beforehand. In their place, sports stimulates the release of endorphins, which are your body's natural happy chemicals. Playing a sport alongside others teaches us the value of teamwork. Instead of reading about it or being lectured about it, sports forces you to put into practice. It also helps develop leadership that can be applied in all areas of life. Team sports teaches you how to deal with setbacks. No team wins all the time. Dealing with loss or poor performance, learning from it and trying again is all part of the journey. Setbacks build resilience, and this can be carried over into everyday life, helping you navigate the tough times and find a way through them. Playing sports helps you get a better night's sleep. We all know how important sleep is to our overall well-being. After training or competing, mind and body are ready for a good night's rest. Thanks for the time to read this, and I hope this helps. Next one is from Kristen Insadny. Please support allowing sports to continue. I am the parent of a sophomore and a senior at MHS. My sophomore ran cross country this fall, and my senior is hoping to play hockey this winter. I understand and agree that community safety is the first priority. Due to the numerous safety measures taken at school and school activities, it is my understanding that the majority of the spread of COVID in our community is happening outside of school and school activities. I am seeing the opportunity to play sports as bringing out the best in students and parents. For many students, sports are an incentive to make good choices. I know my sophomore cross-country runner made many choices through the season to social distance, including not socializing, in order to remain eligible to keep running. I am also seeing parents and community step up to do the extra work needed to keep sports safe. At our hockey winter sports meeting, we learned that an anonymous donor will be providing the masks skaters are required to wear during games and practices. How cool is that? We are hearing that while safety measures are absolutely required, they are taking a toll on our emotional health, including and maybe especially for students. Please allow the kids to play. This one is from Melissa Harper. If it is not safe to continue to hold school in person, then it's not safe for sports to continue. It sets a very bad example that we as a district prioritize sports over education. I have high school athletes that live to play sports. Even they don't think it's safe, especially the winter ones coming up. I urge you to cancel athletics to help curb the spread of COVID in our community. Next one is from Chris Schrantz. I just want to provide some input in regards to the school board's tough decision tonight pertaining to athletics. As a sports and orthopedics board certified physical therapist with 20 years of experience, I urge the board to allow athletics to continue during the virtual learning phase for both the physical and mental health benefits and overall well-being of the student athletes. Next one I have is from Alexander Hall. Thank you for pausing in-person instruction at the high school for the next few weeks. I know that to a very large extent the rationale behind this decision is the lack of appropriate staffing, but I urge you to consider that doing so is also the right choice for the additional reasons as follows. In-person instruction is no longer nearly as safe as it was a few weeks ago. Infections in our community are on an exponential rise and are likely to continue to increase for the next few weeks at least. Mitigation measures such as masks and distancing are effective, but they are not sufficient in this new higher risk environment. It's like how a pair of thin knit gloves is totally fine if it's 35 degrees out, but cannot protect you from frostbite if it's -10. The risk environment has changed. Last month's masks and 6 feet of distance were fairly good protection for students and staff, as the likelihood of someone in the building being infected was statistically low. This is no longer the case. The risk is much higher now, and as we know, masks and distance aren't perfect. Staff absenteeism is likely to increase across all schools the next week or two at least. The cases being reported today are, in general, people who were infected 5 to 10 days ago, as there is a built-in delay due to time to develop the symptoms, to schedule a test, and then to receive those test results due to increased volume of testing. Results in our clinic that used to come back the next day are now taking 2 to 3 days, sometimes longer. So it is highly likely that cases will continue to climb for at least the next week or two, even with increased mitigation measures. That means that student and staff absenteeism is likely to climb for the next few weeks as well. It would be better to be ahead of this than playing catch up. Transitioning to a virtual environment helps send the signal that it is not safe to be out and about, which is what all of our local medical, public official, and public health folks are trying to communicate. Now is the time to hunker down. Our hospitals are almost full. A virtual learning environment allows many of the staff to work safely from home. We do not want the heartbreak of nearby Chi-Hi when they lost a beloved teacher, and working for the school district should not require people to put their own health in danger. Yes, teachers are essential, but instruction can be carried out remotely. Families were pledged in August that the district would transition to blended or remote models if cases in Dunn County increased. I have received many distraught communications from parents who agonized over the decision between in-person and virtual this summer, often due to family members having conditions that put them at high risk for complications from COVID. It chose in-person as they had faith that if things worsened, the school would transition to blended or online. These families are now stuck. They no longer feel it is safe to send their students to in-person school, but they have no other option unless they were to withdraw and switch to homeschooling, which is not feasible for most families with working parents or without backgrounds in education. They feel as if the district has kept moving the goalposts on this, and that this level of risk is not only something they didn't sign up for, it's unacceptable. In light of all these reasons to pause in-person instruction, I highly encourage you to also suspend in-person instruction at the middle school level and shift to either blended or some other model at the elementary level. Opt in virtual for those students who want it and whose families can support it to decrease student density in the schools. I am fully aware that this is a significant hardship for many families from a daycare standpoint if elementary schools are not in person 5 days. So I urge you to please do everything you can to help decrease transmission in order to still have some level of in-person available for those youngest students who need it. Additionally, for all the reasons bulleted above, I also feel that it would be highly inappropriate to continue athletics at this time. We know that athletic activity poses a higher risk of viral transmission due not only to physical proximity, but also due to increased respiratory depth and rate. In one recent study, an outbreak from an ice hockey game, one pre-symptomatic infected player transmitted the virus to 8 of his 10 teammates and 5 of the 11 opposing teammates. Our district did not follow the recommendation of our public health officials this fall, but we should follow them now. We cannot play fast and loose with the well-being of our community. I understand the importance of athletics for our students' physical and emotional health, but we can use this opportunity to teach them a lesson in resilience, making sacrifices for the good of others. We can do hard things, we can be creative, we can find a way. Thank you for your continued service for our community. And the last one I have is from Mark Doms. I know you are having a meeting this evening to determine the path of SDMA over the next few weeks. I would like to take a moment to ask you to continue to let the kids play athletics during these unique times. As Joe stated in his last email to the district, while student cases and exclusions across the school district are well below the threshold set by public health, there has been a disproportionate number of staff cases and exclusions in Menomonie High School. To me, this says that kids are not the issue and that students are not catching, spreading COVID in a manner that would direct schools to abolish athletics. Many things are being taken away from our kids due to COVID. Please don't let athletics be another one. Our district has proven over the course of the school year that our kids can play athletics without COVID ravaging our school system from athletic exposure. The numbers prove it. Our kids need athletics and social interaction to maintain some sense of normalcy. Please do everything in your power to let them play. Thank you for the time you're reading my email, and I hope you share this with the board. Best of luck moving forward, and I appreciate the work the district does.
Thank you.
Wow. You just knocked one of all of us combined.
I hope your throats Okay, that's all we have for communications then?
That's all.
Want to make sure. Okay, moving on, board and superintendent communications, board members. Anybody?
Well, first off, I tried to remain quiet through this election cycle. I tried not to abuse my office for election purposes, but there's a few things I want to discuss tonight. First, thanks off to everyone that encouraged and supported me during this election cycle. I plan to listen and work hard for everyone, even if you didn't support me. In fact, even if you engaged in personal attacks on my business and my family, including my children and me personally. I plan on listening and working hard for everybody. Something kind of cool that kind of came out of this. I'm actually the first member of my profession, the first chiropractor that ever served in the state legislature, which I didn't know when I decided to start this journey. Many of you know that I am a proud alumni of this district. I'm very proud of this community, and the way I see it, it's my turn to make you guys proud of me. So I look forward to serving you, all of you, in the 28th Assembly District. Thanks.
29.
29.
You said 28.
Oh, 29.
I just want to say on behalf of the district, we're proud to have a member of our school board in the state assembly, so we have an advocate, so.
Well, and I forgot to mention that. You now have a direct ear to the state assembly as well. So that includes an open invitation to all of you in this room, so.
Don't get much closer, right?
That's right.
Thank you, Clint. So, any other communication? Okay, I guess we'll turn it over to Dr. Zadowski.
In the interest of time, I'm not going to go on and on. I'll save the COVID stuff for my COVID report. I do want to talk just a brief minute about the network outage that we had recently in our school district, and I appreciated Mesa and Maddie bringing that up. It was very difficult, and I can't say enough how proud I am of our teachers and staff members and all of our students who got through it. I know that some classrooms are more productive than others, but we did quite a bit of checking in, and what I heard is that our teachers did a great job with it, and there still was a lot of learning in most of our classrooms happening. Katie and her team did amazing things. I mean, it was around the clock. I can't imagine how many texts and phone calls and emails that I had with that team during that time. A full analysis of the issue is being conducted, and we will provide a report to the board. One, to identify exactly what the issues were, and then two, to talk about what we need to do to make sure we don't have another issue like that. What I can tell you, at least with the early analysis, is that this is something that really was unique. We don't anticipate this to happen again. But I do think there are some things with redundancy that we can do to guard against some sort of unique shutdown, because it was very disruptive. And again, I thank everyone for the help and support as we went through that, and I look forward to never having to deal with that again. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Any other board members? Okay. We'll move on to letter 1I, revenue and expense reports for the month ending October 2020.
Dave, I know Leah wanted to attend tonight, but she is not able to. So she provided the board just a real brief paragraph, and if you don't mind, I will read that. What Leah wrote is that the revenues received for October are from local sources such as interest, fees, rentals, capital computer sales, etc. No direct aids from state or federal sources were received in October. In November, we will receive our special education state aid as scheduled. The general fund expenses are slightly lower than last year due to bill timing, lower summer school and transportation costs at the start of the year. As anticipated, special education costs and food service costs are slightly higher than last year, and you can see that reflected in the reports. Any questions at all that you'd like me to pass on to Leah? If you do, feel free to give me an email and we'll get those answered. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Item J, monthly employment report. Any questions on that? Okay, move on to the consent agenda. Action to approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Jim, is there a second?
I'll second.
Penny? I'll just run through what's in the motion. We have minutes from our October 12th meeting, minutes from our special board meeting on October 26th, financial reports, approved general fund checks in the amount of $1.68 million, and cash receipts in the amount of $28,000 for the month of October 2020. Donations exceeding $1,000. We have a $1,000 donation to Wakanda via gym equipment from the Wisconsin Milk Marketing Board. And $3,695 to the high school supplies, Rebecca Scheider's classroom from CVTC. Any questions? Jim?
Just point out a typo, it says for milk marketing board instead of from. Kind of changes the meaning.
Yeah. Yeah, and they've even changed their name to Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin now, too, instead of not marketing boards. Thanks, Jim. Any other questions? Comments? Okay, Jamie, let's go.
I can't see it.
Okay, motion carries 9-0. Thank you. Moving on to item 3, action agenda A, approve action to approve staff reimbursement for personal data use during network shutdown. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Amy, is there a second? Tricia, discussion.
Yeah, Dave, I've talked with Leah about this. We know that there were a number of staff members that had data plans that weren't unlimited. In those cases, some of those staff members burn through their data pretty quick and are going to incur additional personal charges. Leah and I have talked about a way to have a form set up where staff members can request that reimbursement. We also know that there were some printing being done at personal expense, and we would also have an option for staff members to request reimbursement for that. Again, the teachers did a great job with the outage, and I would like to make sure they don't incur personal expenses for what they did to make the classrooms run. So I request your approval of this, please.
Questions? $25 is enough to cover it, you feel?
Well, the way we wrote it in there, Dave, is that yes, we think that is fair. However, if someone wants to make an additional request beyond that, we will consider those individually.
I see you have it broken down, $25, additional data expenses, and itemized reimbursement payment for other expenses. So does that mean it could accumulate more than $25?
It could, correct.
Okay, Charlie?
Any sense of what it's going to cost in total?
You know, I think many of our staff members have unlimited data, but no, Charlie, I do not have a real good figure for the total cost.
Any other questions? Discussion? Okay, Gene, let's vote. Nine zero, Jamie?
Yep.
Okay, motion carried.
You can see that's on the top line there, about
I'm sorry, that was a personal.
what I mean.
Yeah, I got it. Motion carries 9-0. Action item 3B, action to approve the completion of fall athletic seasons. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there a second? Tanya?
I'll second.
Discussion.
So Dave, obviously moving to the virtual environment is a decision that has not been taken lightly. It was a really rough weekend thinking about it. To be honest, we got to the end of last week and we limped into the weekend. There's just too many cases where staff have either tested positive for COVID or they're excluded from working for 14 days because of a close contact to someone with COVID. And I applaud our staff. Really since the beginning of the school year, staff members have been covering for each other. And I applaud the school board. I mean, you know how many people we've added. We've lowered class sizes, we've added full-time substitutes. We've done an amazing job to get to this point. But it would be irresponsible to continue school in person further than where we're at right now. Something has to change. We do need to get our staff healthy. We need to make sure we can staff our buildings to an adequate level. So we monitored the data very closely over the weekend. I was crossing my fingers because we know that we're getting a number of staff members back this week. But a couple things happened. One, there were a couple more positive cases. There were a few more exclusions, and a couple of the staff members set to return Even though they get through their 10-day isolation period, they still need to be healthy enough to return. And in a couple cases, that's not the case yet. So, after consulting with principals, directors, I reached out to several staff members over the weekend and had direct communication with a number of our staff members. Last night I determined that we needed to make the change. I had been talking to Mr. Drake for quite some time about how we could successfully end first quarter and begin second quarter to try to make the transition as smooth as possible. The network outage made it even more difficult, but I think we've come up with a good plan. However, because of the terrible timing of this, a plan that we could not come up with would be a plan to continue with fall activities and begin winter activities, but especially the fall activities. Under what the board approved last August, it was put in there that if we go virtual, that all fall sports and activities would cease. And because that's the policy that the board approved, I did not allow practices to happen tonight. I think it's important to follow the policy that the board approved. So that's why essentially I'm bringing it back to you tonight for your consideration and for you to provide us some direction as to what you would like us to do with the fall activities. You heard from a number of the students, you've heard from a number of the parents. At 5:11 p.m. we received a note from KT Gallagher, and I loaded that in for the board as well. The health department, you're well aware that the health department has not recommended sports from the beginning. And I know people are very concerned. I'm very concerned about the numbers in our community, the number of cases, the number of hospitalizations. And she's suggesting that we do not have the sports continue. Last week, a lot of my discussions with the Dunn County recovery team, also statewide calls with superintendent organizations, with health departments. There is a lot of discussion about this, and everyone fully recognizes that schools play a very important part in the battle against COVID, but we also understand that schools advocate for kids, superintendents advocate for kids. And a couple of questions that I asked that I did not feel like I received a satisfactory answer for is how do I go to our coaches and our students and tell them that even though they've been following all these protocols and doing a very good job following these protocols, that they're no longer going to be able to participate. Yet you look at what's happening downtown, you hear about what happened over Halloween at the bars, bus trips between bars, stores, people not being masked up, not even coming close to following the protocols that our students are following. And I have a real hard time with that. I have a real hard time punishing our students when people in our community are able to roam free and do what they want. I asked the question, how many citations have been issued for people not wearing masks and violating the governor's order in our community? The answer is 0. So I don't know what to tell you. But what I do know is that I've always advocated for kids. I've always felt that we need to take the kids first approach. And I'm very saddened that we're at this point where instruction is going to be changed at the high school level. And I'm very saddened that we even have to talk about taking opportunities away from our kids.
Did you want to have comment from Joe and Dr. Ruffin on this as well, or?
Sure, I don't know if the board has questions or if you want to ask them for comments first. It's really the pleasure of the board. But I appreciate Coach Labuda and Coach Lillydahl and Dr. Walker offered to be here tonight to answer your questions and to share their thoughts. And I thought it would be a great opportunity. So do you guys have prepared comments? Would you like to maybe start with that?
Would you like to go first, or would you like me to?
I don't care. I just have my letter, if you guys want me to read that and kind of talk about it. Or do you guys, is that okay?
To the mic there.
Yes, and I want you to know, Coach Lilydell, I did share your letter with the board, but you can certainly discuss the points you'd like.
Yeah. Oh gosh, can you hear it? Sorry. So I'm Erin Liddell. I am the high school coach for the swimming deck team. I'm also actually the head coach for the gymnastics team in the winter season, and I'm a special education teacher at Wakanda for our district. So I've seen a lot of levels of how COVID has affected our schools, and I feel I'll continue to see that. So I just kind of wrote a letter about how our swim team has now qualified 4 girls for state, and we've qualified 2 relays, 2 individuals, which is the most we've done in my 4 years coaching. Every year qualifying somebody, but this is our biggest success so far. We do have plans for moving forward. Our swim team has had incredible mitigation efforts this season. We've had very low numbers of COVID cases on our team, and our girls have followed these. I've been complimented by Mr. Myron as he walks in at times that, wow, your girls are 6 feet apart, and they are. These kids understand it. I say gather up and they spread out. And it's been really impressive to see them put that effort in. So now we're down to 4 girls, and my plan moving forward for this week would be each girl will get their own lane. Lanes, the middle lanes are 6 feet apart, we've measured. So they will be following 6-foot social distancing. We can even put one-on-one in. There's lots of extra efforts we can do. As far as following the measures we've already been following, our team is open if you guys have other suggestions, other things that you would like to see us do to keep us safe. Our team is dedicated to keeping the community safe and keeping the school safe. I know many of my swimmers have stated they didn't attend the Halloween get-togethers, they didn't do the things because they want to be here. They wanted to reach this level, and they reached it. And to have that taken away would be extremely detrimental to them in this last couple of days here. I truly think we can do that in a safe manner. The WIA has released tons of protocols for the state meet this weekend. Nobody other than the swimmers are allowed in the pool area, which will keep the numbers extremely low. Typically at those meets, there's lots of extra athletes, and there won't be. And I believe our girls will be able to follow those well, and I believe that their policing of that will help to keep us safe and our community safe. So I ask that you keep that in consideration. You heard our families. I sent an email and said, would any of you be willing to transport your own students? Because that is my biggest concern as far as being able to keep mitigation. Transferring 4 kids in a van, you try to social distance, but 6 feet is hard in a van, and every one of my parents said, I'll transport my own daughter if that's what it takes. So the girls are willing to do what it takes, their parents are willing to do what it takes, and I'm willing to do what it takes. So I hope that we can continue to reward these girls and allow them to see the end of their season, the end of their successes that they've worked for, in addition to the football team and all of the sports that are still continuing now. I think they're all important and deserve that. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Clint?
You're not off the hook just yet. You guys are down to 3 practices, and then the meet is Friday, correct? And I assume the girls are all tapered, so you're probably not even doing that long a practice?
Oh, yes, very short practices, 3 practices. Tuesday, it would be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we will be traveling to Waukesha on Friday. Yes, you're correct.
Any other questions? Okay. Joe or Dr. Walker, whoever wants to go.
First of all, I know you're all in a tough spot with elected officials, and I don't envy you, and the decisions you make are really tough decisions. I know you have obligations to keep the student body and the community safe. I also wouldn't be here if it was we were in week 2 or week 3 of our season, or even if it was at the beginning. But we're 10 weeks into the season. We had 3 weeks of practice prep, and then we had our football had a 7-game season. During these 10 weeks, our players have done a tremendous job of following the protocol that was put into place by the WIA, and then some additional protocol that we put in as well on top of the WIA protocol. So in these 10 weeks, we've had 1 positive case, no coaches. That 1 case occurred 3.5 weeks ago. With the contact tracing, we did a really detailed review of contact tracing play-by-play, and all the different students he had possibly been around. After that contact tracing, there were 13 players that were quarantined for 14 days. Out of those 13 players, 12 of those players had, no issues. The 1 player, he got through his 14 days, and on the 15th day, and we believe this is a result of a parent, of work. he ended up tested positive, and that's the only one, but it was actually after his quarantine day. He hasn't been around our students for 28 days. The one player that, like I said, so we haven't had any outbreaks within our team, from the one case that did occur. Incidentally, his whole family tested positive. No one knows for sure, as you know, that's where he got it from, but we kind of assume it came from the family. Some of the things we've put in protocol in place that were above the WI rules, and obviously we don't know the things that WI requires as far as all coaches and players and managers wearing masks. But one of the things we did was in the locker room where normally we have a senior section, a junior section, sophomore, so freshmen, we took the lockers and went junior, sophomore, or junior, freshman, sophomore, juniors, because the freshmen aren't in the locker room at the same time as the seniors, and same with sophomores. So ended up putting the lockers about 8 feet apart. If we do, and I think that helped a lot, we spent very little time in the locker room, no showering, 15 kids in, 15 kids out. If we do, obviously we're going virtual. I was thinking about that today. I think we could actually eliminate even using the locker room, because they could just bring their stuff in their vehicle and put it right back into their vehicle when they're done their travel bag, and not ever even enter into the locker room, because if they're not in school, they wouldn't have to go to their locker room. They could just bring the stuff right with them. So we actually could eliminate, because that was one of my greatest concerns, was the locker room and being inside. So going virtual actually helps that situation. We've had used virtual scouting reports instead of handing out scouting reports. We were able to do that through how we do water at practice. Obviously changed. What each student brings, a milk jug filled with water, has their number on them, name and number on the milk jug. We set those around the field about 10 feet apart, so when we send them to water, it's the only time they ever take their mask off, and they go with the water jug, and that's how we do it, so that there's no sharing of water or even any type of water spouts or anything like that. We haven't done our film after practice that we typically do. We've tried to avoid indoor activity. The last 2 weeks we've upped our level of precautions and protocol, just because of some of the increased numbers in school. We've done some different things. I've actually had them bring a separate mask besides the one that's on their helmet. And anytime we're talking to them, they're putting a mask, like a normal mask on, when they take their helmet off, things like that, so I could talk to them. And a couple things we've done also, we've shortened the time periods, and we throughout our practices, so they're only in one spot, 6 to 8 minutes, and then move to a different spot with different things that we're doing. As far as other things that we're at the point in the season where our kids know what they're doing, our schemes are in. We're not doing physical things, at this point. And even if this wasn't, during the pandemic, at this time of the year, we've always reduced down what we're doing physically. We don't want to get the kids beat up for the playoff comes and things like that. But what we did is in case we had a contact tracing, we went with 6 and 8 foot splits for our line splits, and just kind of and eliminated the huddle. So the kids stand about 8 feet apart of a semicircle on the offense. Quarterback stands way back, calls the play, and they go to the line 6 to 8 feet apart. We've totally eliminated the defensive huddle. They just kind of stand in their position. And it's more of a lot of talk through and scheme at this point. One of the things that we did learn, and I think everybody learns, as we've gone along, everybody's learned from, different things about, protocol and things. And one of the things that when we did the contact tracing that I wasn't very aware of is how we ended up eliminating some of the kids that had to go home and eliminated from the team that had tracing was they were standing by the same person on the sideline, too close for too long. And when you're coaching and you're not looking behind you, when we went to look at the film and find out which kid that was something we needed to take care of. So what we did is I have a coach that's a volunteer coach that just comes to practice normally Tuesdays and Wednesdays, Stan Tischer. We brought him along to the last 2 games, and that was his sole job, was to make sure all the kids on the sideline, because I'm looking at the field and not looking out on behind me. So that was his sole job, was to make sure those kids were, staying, farther than 6 feet apart, standing next to each other inside. Those are the players that were not in the game, obviously. Away trips, we did some different things. We kind of alternate where they sit, one by the window, one on the aisle. Tried to keep, took extra buses, obviously, to keep them 6 feet apart. Mask on, obviously, at all times. One of the things we did is, we didn't shower away. We brought towels, and they toweled themselves down. Like, for example, when we played at Marshall, they had 3 locker rooms under the stadium, so we just, yes, it was a little smelly on the way home to see it given, but it was the right thing to do. The kids would towel down, put a dry shirt on, put sweatpants on, take their uniforms off, and put it back in their travel bag. And what we did is then when they came out of the locker room, they had 3 locker rooms, and we'd have 12 in and 12 out. We had a line of 3 coaches with hand sanitizer, and they came through and we squirted them into their hands. They went and got their sub and they sat, rather than stop on the way home for food, they sat out in the field about 10 to 12 feet apart. And then we put the mask on and loaded back on the bus. So those are some of the things that we've done kind of above and beyond. One of the things, if you look at the data, not that there's not a risk, obviously, in anything we do right now, but the one thing they're finding out through data is they haven't really had transfers. It hasn't been transmitted in competition. Like, for example, the Tennessee Titans played the Vikings, not knowing that they had COVID issues. The day after, when they did their testing, they had 17 positive cases, yet the Vikings never ended up with one, and they had played a whole game against the University of Wisconsin, played the University of Illinois, and the same thing happened. 2 days afterwards, the Badgers ended up with a lot of students testing positive, yet the team they played did not. So they're really finding a lot of data is that there's not a lot of transmission, and that could have to do with kids wear gloves nowadays, they have long sleeve shirts on, and the fact that they would have masks on the helmet itself. My proposal would be at this point, as we're obviously up 10 weeks in, we've only had the 1 case. They're doing it different for football compared to the other sports. They're not actually having a statewide state championship. They were just worried about sending schools to different sides of the state, sending a school from here down by Madison and things like that. So they divided it up into 4 quadrants. They're going to have a Northwest champion, a Northeast champion, and so on. And so we're the number 1 seed in the Northwest champion, and they moved us up to Division I. We actually volunteered to do so, and so we could stay more regional. Otherwise, we would have had to travel farther away. And so we're the number 1 seed in Northwest. And here's what my proposal would be. The weather does not look good for tomorrow. I would probably not practice tomorrow. I'd really try to avoid staying inside, even though we were told not to today. We may not have practiced anyway. I really don't like getting them inside. I would probably stay away. My proposal would be, if the weather's bad, like they say, snow, rain, we probably wouldn't practice tomorrow. So what we're asking for is to practice on Wednesday and Thursday, play our semifinal Northwest game on Friday. The following game is on Thursday, so we would have practices on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then we would play on Thursday. So we're talking about a total of 5 practices and 2 games at this point. As far as a couple other things, I know that people can say, you know what, there's always next year. But the one thing I look at is I got to look at those 23 seniors, and there is no next year for them. We started the season 0-1, really frustrating for our kids who got beat in a really close game. And I remember our kids looking at me saying, we're going to be 6-1 at the end. I don't know how many people really believe that, but the kids worked extremely hard to get to that point and get the number 1 seed. Really proud of our kids. I'm not a medical expert. I tried to lean on Dr. Walker throughout the year. I had several conversations and phone calls to ask him, what would you do with this, what would you do with that, as far as different protocol. Dr. Walker's on our sideline, so he's been able to witness what we've been doing firsthand. If you have any questions, he came along to ask that. But again, I appreciate you listening to me, and I sure know you're in an awful tough spot. I certainly understand that. And I wouldn't want to be in your shoes at this point, because there's a lot of tough decisions as far as the school community and a lot of things involved. Okay, thank you for listening to me.
Hey, Joe, is that second game automatic, or only if you win the first?
No, we would have to win the first one.
That was my question too,
Yep.
thank you.
No, and I'm not taking it for granted.
I just didn't want your players thinking that you thought you might win the first.
Coach, it's my understanding that the second game would be optional.
If we would get beat the first game, we would choose. You can play a second game against the loser of the other side. They've left that out. We would not take that option. Just, at this point, we'd understand with the numbers, we would not take that option.
Any other questions for Joe?
I just wanted to say thank you. The amount of your dedication for these kids, for how long and how many kids you've had that you were responsible since you started, and the percentage. So if you can just make sure that I'm reading it correctly, Joe. Carrie put together the percentages, and if I'm looking quickly, you have obviously the largest group of kids, but you have yet one of the lowest percentages with that.
And I'm not saying we haven't had to get on kids.
Sure.
There's times we've had to really be stern with our kids about, there's no exception to this. But after a while, the kids start to realize that, and they adapt.
So just thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And if you have any questions for Dr. Walker, as far as,
Tricia?
I guess I just would love to hear from Dr. Walker.
Thanks for the opportunity. I guess I'm speaking mostly as an observer tonight, because I get the chance to watch what happens. And, I sent Joe a couple texts, just saying thanks for what you're doing for these kids. And also, just for the superb job that this whole coaching staff has done dealing with this pandemic. When we talk about the things that mitigate risk of COVID, we don't want to hand washing, and Joe already talked about that, but that's definitely emphasized. And I get to hear, talks after games and just what he's saying to the players, and get to see what's happening. The second thing is just the whole thing about masking. And sort of tongue-in-cheek, when I sent you a letter before season, I said Joe has a much better chance of achieving obedience to masking than any health official in this community does. And I think that that's true, and I think that that's really happening as well. And then just the social distancing thing. I actually had Chris Rance take a picture, Friday night in Richmond, because their travel bags are in 2 rows, 100 yards of the sideline, to keep them all apart while they're putting on the equipment and taking them off. So I think that all of those things that they've done is what's led to only 1 case for the whole season. So I think the staff has done this with great excellence. And this coming week, with that we don't travel, Joe actually had 4 buses into Richmond, so that the kids were not at all close in the travel. And this weekend, and if we win the next weekend, those games are both here, so it's just a matter of getting a car ride to the stadium with your family. So that handles that aspect of things as well. One of the things I think that marks this program is just the great concern that the staff has for the players. And, so these kids have committed 5 years of their life to this, and they have an opportunity to play for something in a Division I place, because it's challenging for that, and to do something, winning, a Northwest title in the year of a pandemic, as opposed to just going home. So I would really urge you to consider allowing them to play.
Thank you, Doctor.
Any question?
Any questions?
One correction I would have to make with Dr. Barker would be aware of is, and this is totally up in the air yet, it's not guaranteed. The WI did come out and say, if you can't allow each side to have 2 parents, that you may not be able to host, and may have to flip. And my players are going to hear this, and they don't know that, but I want to be honest and upfront. We were supposed to host the first 2 games, but because the University of Wisconsin only allows us to have just our senior parents, and that would be an unfair advantage because the other team wouldn't get any parents there. It may not allow us to host, so it may flip. We may have to play away. I just want to be honest and upfront. That may end up happening, which my players probably just found out. I didn't have a chance to tell them, but I did want that to not be out front. So.
And I have not talked to the chancellor about that yet. I wanted to wait and see what the board does tonight. In the event that football is able to continue, we would reach out to the chancellor and find out if there's any possibility of allowing the increased attendance so that our kids would not have to travel. But that's really up to Stout, and
I just wanted to.
I appreciate you bringing that up.
Up front so that they realize,
Yep.
which my players probably down know. So.
Thanks, Bill. Questions or comments from the board? Tricia?
This is a question for Joe more than anything.
Joe Zadowski?
Yes, sorry. Besides football and swimming and hockey, what other sports or activities are we looking for the fall?
Well, what this action item about are the fall sports, and the only 2 fall sports left are swimming, girls swimming, and dive. That's 1 sport, and then football.
Oh, okay.
However, I will say that, it's difficult when we have winter sports set to start next week. What the board looks at here and decides for fall sports, will provide some direction. The board already approved the winter sports. However, depending on when those sports start, what kind of mitigation protocols are in effect, what the board does with fall sports, I have not made any decisions about moving forward with winter sports from the district standpoint. I know we have the policy approved, but when I look at the staffing and look at the building numbers, I have to consider that as well.
And then, so a follow-up to that, so would there be any activities that would be included in this too? Like I know Science Olympiad is starting up. I mean, I think they're doing it virtual, but like those kind of activities would be
Yes.
affected?
In the event that the board takes the stance that all gatherings outside of school are closed, then that would include all activities, all sports.
The other question I have for you is, other schools that you know of in our area that are doing virtual, are they continuing with sports still?
At the beginning of the season, Tricia, it was more like what we had planned, where if you went virtual, that means it was bad enough and you needed to cancel. We have seen a shift in that. More and more schools have gone through the same situation we're going through tonight. And especially in this situation, and when we talk about the school closing more in the COVID report, this closing really is about staffing. Yes, there are student cases, and every case is extremely concerning, and there is a disproportionate number of student cases at the high school, which is concerning. However, we would not be moving to the virtual environment if we could still staff our building adequately. And actually, it's not just about staffing the high school, it's about staffing the other schools, which the decision to move to the virtual environment not only will fix staffing at the high school, but it'll also allow us to reallocate staffing to support the other schools and keep those schools open.
Other questions or comments? Chris?
It's just so hard to figure out exactly how transmission happens or what our good fortune is due to. I'm actually a little bit kind of convinced that your football program helped keep kids safe, kids that would be risky otherwise. And so I in no way want to comment on what you've done or how important you are for those kids, for sure.
And I mean, no one can sit here and say, it's not going to happen. I can't guarantee it's not going to happen. All I can guarantee you is we're going to take all the steps necessary to try not to happen.
The only thing that I would want us to all be very aware of is that this board has got a consistent habit of not following its own policy. And so one thing that we all knew when we started this was that that was our policy, that once we shut down the schools, we were going to shut down the sports, and we all agreed that that's what we were going to do. It seems, I'm surprised that we're in this situation where we're going back and revisiting that since we already voted on that. And it's not that we're punishing these kids at all. The board actually trying to help the kids out by being as supportive as we could, and to allow sports to continue even above the recommendation of our community health advisors at Mayo, with the exception of Dr. Walker, and of Casey Gallagher. So we made that decision, no one was punishing those kids at all, but giving them the opportunity as far as they went. I think that's, that can't be flipped and now be used as a lever why we need to change our minds. The other thing that is important to kind of point out is that if we didn't, I would be, especially when you went through all the mitigation measures you have, you're like, our parents are going to drive the kids there, there's no contact. I feel like I would have been like, yes, except we had to put this provision in place because we went with a high-risk sport. That's why we have this linkage. So in any event, it's not that anyone doesn't care about these kids going to play their dream, but it is another example of the board's inability for it to follow its own policy, and then to not create a rational argumentation, explanation as to why we're not doing this, or at least to say, our policy actually is not being followed, so we should probably make a new policy for what our COVID mitigation strategies are, especially since we have a new board that's starting right now. So by doing this, and it's gonna happen, it's continuing to put us in a situation where when there's community members that are concerned that we don't follow our own policy or we move our goalposts, which is a bad metaphor for this one. But those things are true. There's no getting around that. So I'm pretty sure we all know what's going to happen in the vote, but I would really caution the board the degree to which that we seem to have no problem not following our COVID strategy or not following the recommendations of the people who provide guidance on health in the community, and that we continue to go it alone. And then what's also interesting is that what we do, other schools do as well. So we don't just influence what happens in our own school. And thinking about this in the larger picture, if the vote's going to happen and this is going to continue, which is exactly what's going to happen, the board owes it to the community to make a policy that we're actually going to follow. If we say we're going to follow the Department of Health, Dunn County, we do that. If the board says we're going to follow the advice of our health advisors, we do that. If we say that we have a plan that says after 2 weeks of rising cases and high burden, we're going to close down, we do that. I'm sad to say that that hasn't been the attitude of this board.
I guess one thing I'd like to say, Chris, is that I'd rather be accused of amending our policy as we go along and being adaptive to the situation as fluid as COVID is and what it's done for our district than to be a district or a board that stuck their foot in the sand and said, we're not changing no matter what. And I think that this board and the administration has been extremely good at looking at what our options are out there and what we need to do as a district to protect our students and staff as much as possible. We know that majority of our parents wanted their kids back in school. They wanted in-person learning. They wanted sports. We've heard a ton of evidence from parents and that about how important sports and things like that are in students' daily lives. And it's not just sports, as Tricia pointed out. My son just signed up for forensics here in the last week or two, and even though it's going to be virtual saying the speech, he's still going to do it and move ahead with it. So there's a lot of other things that play here besides just the sports side of it. And I know, Joe, you and I talked too, there's other evidence put out from the state about the benefits of the students being involved in school and sports as well. Things that, Dr. Walker, some of you touched on them a little bit tonight, but there's a lot of other things that are important as well to the well-being of students and things of that nature. So as far as being guilty of changing our policy or what our district is going to do as a board, I think it's more reacting to the situation as it develops in our district and being amiable to solutions that work the best for not only our students, population, but kids, or the community and staff as well. Tricia?
The middle school. Does this affect any of their sports or anything to do with them as well?
The fall sports at the middle school are all completed. They have started up some of their winter activities. I believe swimming and basketball are going on right now. So yes, this action item doesn't, but it's like the other winter sports at the high school.
And just the one thing that goes along with that, I'm glad actually in regards to like they do the sports and then we're in the virtual, we're doing virtual education, less chance of spreading it in person if they're not there. But then I think in the back of my head, I have to at least mention like the concern about, if they have middle school siblings or elementary siblings and I'm not expecting a solution from you, but I just feel like that needs to be acknowledged that could still possibly happen. So.
Yes, I agree. I do agree that there are high school athletes that have siblings, and we have seen it transmit within family units. In fact, I would say a majority of our cases have been transmitted through the family units to our students. We have seen that. So it is very possible. There is higher risk by allowing any gathering compared to not having any gathering. But I also think the board members need to keep in mind that, and we've talked about this before, we can't compare having activities to a utopian viewpoint of everyone staying home. Because these kids are not going to stay home, their families are not staying home, and if I have a son who's a junior, I would much rather have him, or a daughter who's a junior, I would much rather have them spending time with Coach Lillydahl and Coach Labuda than doing other things.
Amy?
To me, there's a big elephant in the room. This is an emergency situation. This is not a hoax. The whole idea of the hospitals are completely full. People in Menomonie now have to go to La Crosse if they need intensive care bed. They don't have any. It's just, coming out of hand. And anything we can do to mitigate that, to me, is important. In fact, I would like to see not just the high school be virtual, but the middle school and elementary as well. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Alex Hall. I think she knows her stuff. And I'd like to follow the health departments. I think that's really important. I think we need to follow those things. I mean, I feel bad for the kids. I feel bad, that they can't finish their seasons. But it's also going to teach them some resilience as well.
I think it's really important that a accurate projection of the situation is given. There are beds in Eau Claire. I just spoke to a representative from Mayo. There are beds, but it is very concerning. Hospitals are seeing surge, and that is very concerning. But I think to say that someone cannot get a bed in the Chippewa Valley is not accurate. I also think that suggesting that we need to close all schools because of COVID is very, very problematic. In the calls I've had with the recovery team, our health providers are very concerned if we close schools. They are short on staffing, and if we close schools and they have to provide care for their children, that is going to provide a crisis for our health providers. And the move to virtual, like I said before, is about staffing.
Any other discussion?
Can I just rebut for a second? Okay, maybe I'm not office about the beds, but they're going to get filled. I mean, this is an emergency. This is a situation. Even the Dunn County sent out a thing today from Paul Miller that says that this is a huge emergency situation.
It is an emergency situation, I agree.
Jim?
So, first a little history here, personal history. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, football, basketball, baseball. Went to college on a football scholarship. Did a lot of coaching at one point in time at many different levels. So I've been inside and outside of sports. I know what it benefits, what are the negatives. I think the benefits are often oversold. And yes, it will be disappointing if they don't get to finish the football season. It'll be disappointing if they don't get to finish the swim season. But you know what? You'll get over it. I've been there. I've played on championship teams. I've played on teams that won 3 games out of 20. You just learn. That's, and the things you learn in sports, you can learn just about anywhere. So it's not a be-all. It's not an end-all. It's not the greatest thing we do. Education is the greatest thing we do. Okay? Secondly, we are in an emergency. I was been on a Zoom meeting on Thursday, and it was the folks from Mayo, and they were basically saying right now they have so many people out. It's over almost 300 people are out from Mayo systems that they're having to import doctors and nurses from as far away as Arizona to actually staff our medical centers here. Okay, And yes, they are. I actually talked to someone from Yale this morning, and there are no bed spaces in Eau Claire or Menomonie, and yes, they are shipping them to La Crosse, if you were going to Rochester. That was an accurate statement. So we are in a huge problem. The other problem I have is, if we approve this, this will be the third time that the Dunn County Health has recommended no sports and we've overruled them. They recommended no fall sports, the board voted fall sports. They recommended no winter sports, I wasn't here for that, they voted it in. Now, they're second, once again, they're saying no sports, so you should get rid of them, and if you override that. My concern is liability. If we keep going against what the health department says and people get sick with COVID, what kind of liability do we have? It's an unknown, because COVID suits are just starting. There's been quite a few files over workplace things and stuff like that. It's a completely unknown field, and it's leaving us, by not following the experts' advice, leaving us wide open. So I voted against sports earlier because it was against the health department recommendations, and at this point in time, I don't see why we should go against the health department recommendation. They're the experts, we're not. We have to listen to them.
Charlie, thank you, Lynn. The reality is right now, for a high school age student, the safest place for them to be is on the swim team or the football team. As of today, the average Dunn County resident, your chances of having COVID is a little bit over 3.5%. A Dunn County resident between 10 and 19, it's about 4.5%. For a student or staff member in our district, it's just over 3%. For an athlete, for a non-athlete in the high school, it's 4%. Swim team, 0. Football team in its entirety, 2.9%. So they've done a good job of mitigating the problem. That doesn't mean that there's something isn't going to happen. I think we owe it to them to give them, 4 or 5 more practices, a couple of meets. I just think that we owe it to them to do that. And the reality is, it's a safe place to be compared to the other places that they could be.
Jim? No, just one thing I forgot to say was in that meeting on Thursday, they were asked questions about sports. And they said winter sports, especially a couple of them like basketball, wrestling, hockey, they're considered extremely high risk. And I once spent an awful lot of time on the basketball court and understand what the game is like. And I could easily see one person who is COVID positive and not knowing it. By the end of the game, everybody in that court is going to have it. It's a really high risk sport, and I know I wasn't here. I was out chasing invisible elk in the mountains. But I really think we need to revisit that decision. I think it's going to create some really huge risks for athletes, not only ours, but from other districts and other schools.
Segues in. My bigger concern, honestly, is what we do with winter. I think we can wrap up the fall sports safely with what we've got. We've got 2 sports left. By the way, I'm a 2-sport athlete, the best ones, football and swimming, actually. But it's not on the agenda, but we can't talk about the winter sports, but I agree. I think we need to revisit what we're doing with that. I think that's the bigger elephant in the room, the bigger issue at this point, and what we do with the club teams. But I already violated meeting rules because it's not on the agenda.
But that's something we could revisit beyond. I've already paused practices for tonight. We could pause winter stuff. I know that in talking to Superintendent Claire, they're planning to move forward with winter sports, but we have talked to the superintendent level about perhaps pausing until we know more about community situations.
Like Clint just kind of mentioned, I think we're getting off the rails on this a little bit. The action item is in regards to fall sports, and now we've gone way over into winter and redoing. I think that we should vote on this action item and then either save this discussion to further add to the COVID report or add another agenda item for the following meeting in regards to winter sports. I think we need to stick to what's on the agenda at this point.
Any more discussion on fall sports? Chris?
Yeah, I'd agree with Penny, like, just keep it focused on what we're talking about, and so just to narrow that down, we're right, there are no beds in this town. Like, I live next to the Paulsons, and I talked to Margaret frequently, she's like, what are you guys doing? They don't have any beds in their staff is low, same with our staff, because they're working in situations that aren't particularly safe. And what we keep on focusing on, you know, like the particular situation that we have, in this case, it's the athletes. But that's not the community that we're talking about. What we need to talk about is how this affects how we make decisions and how we lead in this community in an emergency. I mean, they're having to find, like, new places to put beds in this town because the hospital's full. And that's true. Staff is out. Our staff is out. And we have to be leaders because we're community leaders. We're elected by the community to make, you know, positive choices that represent the values of who we are. Which is a much bigger responsibility than talking about the last couple games or event. And I hate to say it, but I also coach. And I couldn't coach my team this year. But we quit that season with the last game of the season. Because it was the right thing to do. Because we weren't just talking about the risk for those kids on that field, we were talking about how we lead our community through a disaster.
Yeah.
From personal experience, and COVID is ugly, and this is a mess. But 5 years ago, long before COVID, they were shipping patients out to other hospitals because there were not enough beds. We need to focus on the action item in our district at this point. And what we think is right for our students and staff. We can't add extra beds. Yes, we can help mitigate the problem, and our district has been working their butts off to do that for our staff, for our students, for our athletes, our coaches that are here today. You know, the hockey coach chimed in with his, or sent his letter for community communications. These people are mitigating the situation. We're all trying to mitigate. We're all sitting here in masks. We need to move forward because we could beat this to death. And we can't fix it. We can help it. And I believe it's time to take a vote. So is that calling?
You call the question.
I call the question.
Is there any objection? Seeing none, Jamie, let's vote. So a yes vote will be to allow the swimming and football teams to finish their season. Motion passes 6-3. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Walker. I'm sorry, swim coach, and Joe for attending tonight. Okay, we'll move on to the discussion item agenda. We'll start off with the COVID-19 report. Dr. Zabowski.
So a lot of this has already been discussed, so I'm going to jump around a little bit. But we all know the cases in the county are extremely high. Stout is offering free surge testing, and I put a link into my report. It's the third bullet point down. So certainly, you know, testing is not going to fix this thing, but identifying people who have COVID and isolating them can have a positive impact. You know, this was in the report last time. I'm going to skip down a couple bullets about the school guidance from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services. This was in the report last time. I know I pointed it out. But based on some of the communications that I've received from a couple of board members about closing all of our schools, I think it's important that we revisit this. And certainly, you know, we'll do what the board's pleasure is, but, you know, so things are changing. COVID is new, and schools are forced to adapt. This guidance just came out October 20th. So to look at a decision made in August and then try to hold my feet to the fire or call the board dysfunctional because they're trying to react, I think is very counterproductive to our efforts in our school district, and it's really sad to me. But this guidance that was put out October 20th talked about what school administrators should consider, and this is from the state health department, when looking at temporary classroom, school, or district-wide closures. And, you know, you look at those sub-bullet points underneath there. One is when other outbreak mitigation measures were implemented and ineffectual at halting an outbreak transmission. We had that with our volleyball team, one of our volleyball teams. That team was shut down for a while. We had it in one of our special education classrooms. Due to some special needs in that classroom, we were not able to follow the mitigation measures with as much fidelity as in some of the other classrooms. Not by lack of effort, just by circumstance. So that classroom was shut down for a given amount of time. The second one, logistics for in-person instruction have been seriously impacted due to staff and or student absences. That's what this virtual learning is all about. We have too many staff absences to continue to staff our schools. So that's what the high school moving to virtual learning is all about. Classroom and school-wide cleaning and disinfection needs to be completed. We had a math classroom earlier this year at the high school that needed to be closed. And we did that before this guidance came out, by the way. And then the last one, extensive contact tracing is needed to identify all contacts. For example, to a case that attended a large school event, that's what happened with the varsity football team. When that exposure did happen, when that positive case did happen, all the football players were sent home. So the contact tracing could be conducted, and in the event that there was close contacts, they could be quarantined. You know, we took that measure. So again, our people are doing an amazing job working through a very complex and very difficult situation. And I can't say how proud I am, I can't say enough how proud I am of our school nurses, our principals, our coaches, our teachers, our other staff members. The administrative team has just been terrific. We continue to track our data very closely. We continue to share our data as much as possible. I really appreciate the kind compliments we received. I do think we're doing a very good job with our data. I've seen what some of the other schools are doing, and some schools are only reporting active cases, and I understand the political reason for doing that. We have provided a lot of data, and we will continue to provide a lot of data. I think that's important for people to understand our situation. Talking about student and staff attendance, it has risen. We had a real peak in student attendance, student exclusions, September 24th, and then it dropped. It's gone back up, and we are watching that very closely. It's still well below the thresholds recommended by the health departments and the state health advisory, but it's still a concern. But again, the largest concern are the number of staff exclusions. At the last school board meeting, our staff exclusions were 2.86% of our staff. Today it was 8.85, and that's actually come down a little bit. We do have some staff members returning, but the building with the highest staff exclusion rate, Menomonie High School, was 16.81. Again, that's just not sustainable. So you all saw my message last night about the move to the virtual learning environment. I will not repeat everything that's in there, but I do want to emphasize a few things. That we are going to give the teachers some time at the end of the week. There are some students that were excluded or missed school for other reasons. This will give them an opportunity to provide some individual support to those students virtually. Also, our teachers need time to plan for the change. Not only the change of moving to a new term, but also having that new term in the virtual environment. Once school starts back up virtually at the high school, we still plan to run our regular bus routes. Staff will report to work, and buildings will be open for specialized programming and students wanting to use the network for virtual learning. Michelle and her team in the school nutrition department have done a great job planning, and free meals will be available for all high school students, whether they come to the school to use the network or whether they stay home.
So one quick question. You talked about, earlier about medical personnel, students attending, so that they're freed up. Is that still the case then?
Yes, in fact, Dave, any student at the high school that needs to come use the network, or any parent who needs to have the child supervised, will have that opportunity with our high school closure. So it's any student. We don't think there'll be many students that choose to come to the school to use the network. The student population will go dramatically down. We're thinking it'll be less than 100 students, probably closer to 50. But we will have protocols in place to make sure that that's a very safe option. Clint?
Are we gonna have to rediscuss kind of the grading policy again if this lengthens and goes up for a long period of time like we did in the spring? For instance, I know of a few cases where we've had kids out on exclusion that were put at a disadvantage for their grade from kids that were in person because of maybe inability to access the internet. And I know we're gonna open up the schools so they can get there, but maybe they don't have transportation, this type of thing. And I would hate to see long-term consequences, especially in these high school kids where their GPAs are so precious going forward. So it might be something to bring up for discussion if this drags out a long period of time.
We have no plans to change the grading policy this year. Last spring, we had 1 week to prepare. We've been preparing for this for a long time. And our teachers, I could go through all of this, whether it be talking about, having the consistent Google Classroom or, moving lessons online, which really hurt us when we had the network outage. But we have no plans for changing grading policies. We are having beefed up requirements in terms of what that virtual instruction will look like, in terms of synchronous instruction, having regular schedules every single day where the students and teachers will be connecting online. And again, our buildings will be open. This closure is about staffing, and we can provide enough staffing to have our buildings open for the network to be used.
Good question. Amy, then Tricia.
About the food, since they're not gonna be at the high school, do they just come pick, do they have a place to pick up their food?
Michelle will have plans sent out to families, but yes.
All right, thank you.
I believe it's going to be the high school as the pickup facility, but I want to confirm with Michelle.
Okay.
I have not had time to review the school nutrition plan yet.
Tricia?
I have several questions, sorry. How will we know when it's safe for kids to return to school?
Well, the environment is concerning, and it has been concerning since the start of school. We're not closing because of safety for kids. We're closing because of our inability to staff. So when we feel we have staffing that's sufficient, then we will feel like we are prepared to reopen.
And then follow up with that with the staff. From what I've seen in the emails that we've gotten and then social media posts, is it a fair statement, do you think, to say that we don't really know how the staff have become infected? Because the impression that I'm getting from what I'm reading is that it's being transmitted among each other. But do we really know that that's how they're getting it? That it could be from students or who knows who?
It's very difficult to speculate. What I can tell you is I do not have reason to believe that in most cases, staff members have reinfected or have infected other staff members. There have been a couple classrooms, and I think I mentioned one of them already, where I do believe there was classroom transmission due to the nature of that classroom. However, most of the contact tracing that I've seen on our staff is more related to family exposure or exposures outside of our schools. But that is one of the things that keeps me up at night, Tricia. I'm very concerned with our increasing staff numbers and trying to figure out where they came from.
More Tricia, or?
No, someone else can go.
Chris?
It's hard to keep all these figures together. You do a really great job. So I think you said, if I get this right, that the high school has 16% of its staff out, or was it
16.8.
With what?
16.8.
16.8, okay. And so we could assume that some of those are from, like, they came in close contact with somebody. Do we have a number of can we put that 16.8 percentage into numbers of teachers? And then could we also break the numbers of teachers down into those teachers that are actually infected by the disease and those people that are having to go into quarantine because of close contact?
I don't have all those numbers in my fingertips. If you look at the Wednesday updates, I provide updates in terms of how many staff are out, how many cases there are. At the beginning of this report, you can see that there are 32, I'm sorry, I read the student piece. There are 33 staff cases so far in the entire school year. 17 of those have recovered. So there are 16 active staff cases as of this report.
Because that's kind of a lot, given the size of the schools. And
Yeah, there's about 550 staff members around there.
So when we think about, like if I was working in that situation, we should have some way in which we can reach out to staff directly and get some feedback in terms of where their anxiety level is at. Because I know that a lot of teachers are having to go because we don't have, cells, so it's not like they're volunteering, but they kind of have to go and cover classes. And it's not necessarily on a volunteer basis. So they're losing out on prep time, and it changes a lot of the dynamic between how they teach. And so what I think would be really beneficial and as a show of good faith to help us really get kinder teachers is to put together a survey that's totally anonymous, that's done anonymously, where they have guarantee of not having any ways, because we haven't done those types of surveys, ways in which that people can be held accountable for what they say and how they say it. But I think at this juncture, right as we're heading as a break from one point to the other, it'd be a really great time for us to reach out to our teachers and find out where the heck they're at. And then the second thing is that one thing that's problematic, and I liked a little bit about the plan that we put together in August, was that we had clear numbers. And by the way, in August we put that together, we thought that we had 6-foot distancing except for like a couple of classes. So the fact that we actually have 6-foot distancing now in high school doesn't really change what we were thinking about in August. Because when we put together that plan, we're like, oh yeah, we've got pretty much 6-foot distancing. But when we think about what happens to students in the course of a quarter, which is already a shrunk down semester, let's say that they come back on October 30th, and then they have to leave again because of staph infections. No, not October 30th, they'll be back. What day are they supposed to be back? November
30th.
So if they're back on November 30th, let's say they're out again, like in a couple days. And from a student's point of view, it might be more helpful to have an understanding of where you're going to be for that quarter, because it's already shortened, it's already a more stressful environment. And so moving in and out of school situations where you don't know where you're going to be or how you're going to be doing it, that's probably not a really healthy place to be for kids to really maximize their learning. So when we say the way that we're planning for continuing or reopening or reclosing, all those things, they seem to be contingent upon our staff, which are already burdened and stressed. They're also disproportionately affected relative to the rest of the community. And we need to think about where the trajectory of the disease is going. So I think those things do impact how we think about what the benefits are to staying open, and then being closed, and then opening again, and then closing again. Especially in the course of a grading cycle that is cut in half. That becomes a really unstable place for a student to be learning, and a really unstable place for a teacher to be teaching. That's it.
Tricia.
I think and my opinion is that I think it might be nice to have, not to throw more on you, but to have more frequent updates than just once a week. With everything, with everything changing so quickly, and personally, I think it would be helpful to have more. I don't know. I'm not saying every day by any means, but so I wanted to put that down there. And then the other thing is the families that are at the high school that perhaps are already receiving more support in terms of access to education and internet and other support, so social support. Is somebody reaching out to them specifically to try to make sure that their kids are going to, going to all virtual, I can imagine that that's going to add some other issues.
Thanks for that question. I can tell you that when planning began ramping up for virtual, and I know that I shared with in our updates that this is something that could be coming, it came a little bit quicker than what we had hoped. Tonya, all fall, Tonya and her team have created plans, and now they are reviewing IEPs and plans for English language learners, and trying to identify students, and they will be reaching out to those students. And again, that's one of the reasons why our teachers need some time this week, because having that in the IEP, and if there's any IEP modifications that need to occur, those need to take place. But yes, there will be direct contact with some students who we hope will take advantage of the opportunity to come in.
The staff and the teachers that are going to be helping out at other schools, are they going to be able to help out at other schools too? I'm just thinking like PD days that are not COVID related and really worried about mental health for these staff, and is that going to be an option to allow for more flexibility with that?
I do have some of that in the staff workload piece that's coming up next, and I will, if I don't answer, Tricia, please ask that again. Anybody else so far?
I just kind of want to, as a former teacher, kind of think, I was thinking same lines as what Chris kind of said. It seems like the atmosphere right now with, even before you went to virtual, with teachers coming in, teachers going out, students coming in, students going out, one of the important things for education is continuity. And with this model, we absolutely don't have it. You know, you've got different kids in your class, they disappear for 2 weeks, they come back, they disappear for a week. You know, I mean, and the teachers are gone, you got subs. It's not a good atmosphere conducive to good learning. You'd be much better off going virtual or a blended thing that's going to lower the rates, lower things to make more continuity for the students. And the numbers are just going to go up. I mean, with the way, you know, I mean, when I was on that thing Thursday with the NAMA folks, they were just like, you know, they didn't say it, but it seemed like the next thing we're going to get is the refrigerator trucks to keep them warm because it's going to be too full. And the numbers are just literally going through the roof. And we're part of the community, and it's going to affect us. And to get ahead of it and get out in front of it by going all virtual with all the schools as much as possible, or maybe something like Dr. Hall suggested, I think it's going to happen. And the sooner you make this switch and the sooner you do it before the problem actually gets real horrible, the better off our students are going to be and the less COVID we're going to have in the district. I think you're kind of just, you're behind the curve right here on this. And I also think that your November or whatever, 30th or whatever, deadline for reopening is misguided in that we have Thanksgiving, we have Christmas, we have the whole holiday thing coming up, and as you said, people in the communities aren't being responsible. You know, we had a plan, lawsuits got rid of it. There's no hope at the state level really for a statewide plan, so yeah, you may be upset with the community, but that's the reality, is that the community isn't going to cooperate. And to keep students safe and they have good learning, you're going to have to go to a different model, because what we've got isn't going to work in the long run.
I guess I just have a couple things.
First of all, I just wanted to make sure I didn't interrupt. That's why I waited. First of all, I agree with you. Continuity is an important piece of education, and continuity with COVID is very difficult, and it is a problem. There would be more continuity if we go to virtual, you would think. Based on the family exposures we have, I still think continuity is going to be an issue. I think continuity is going to be an issue throughout the pandemic, but I do think that going virtual would improve continuity. I think when this plan was developed and approved, though, I think we also talked about the value of in-person instruction, and this plan was built on the premise of the importance of in-person instruction. Jim, you mentioned if we go blended, that will lower rates. Do you have any, is there any research or any?
No, I'm just saying what we've got now isn't gonna work in the long run. And you're gonna have to do something else, whether it's blended or virtual. Virtual is probably your best bet.
I'm just wondering why you think blended?
Well, with Dr. Hall, if you read her letter.
I did.
She talked about going virtuals with middle school and high school, so you can keep some kind of blended thing going for the elementary kids.
She specifically said blended learning.
Yes, she specifically said that in her letter, that's what I was referencing.
And I know that blended is a tool that some schools are using, but those schools are using blended because they can't get 6 feet. We got 6 feet, we bent over backwards to try to get 6 feet, we got 6 feet. We don't need blended to get 6 feet. We added all these staff members. There could be a benefit to having lower density in the schools, but I have not seen any research or proof, or even looking at other schools, to say that is what's causing any kind of improvement.
Okay.
In terms of being behind the curve, and telling me that, we need to go virtual, and you and I have had this communication already. You keep making this about me, Jim, but ultimately this is the board's plan. If you want the plan changed, request agenda item, and we will carry out whatever plan that the board wants. But this is not about me not making a decision. So I don't know why you keep doing that, but if you want the plan changed, put it on the agenda, and if the board wants to change and you want to put kids all virtual, we'll certainly do that.
Sure. When we started this plan, I asked you who was the person that decided when the plan was changed. That was you. You took responsibility for it. The other thing I wanted to just point out is that Milestones has had COVID in it. Students and teachers, they had to close a class. And some of the other preschools, daycares in the community are also having issues with having to shut down. So it's at all levels. And so it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. And like I said, the sooner we can make a change to virtual, I think we'll all be better off.
Last thing I wanted to just comment on was the November 30th date. That by far is a concrete date. That by far is not a concrete date. That is the first possible date we could come back. And I agree. I think it's likely with deer hunting, with Thanksgiving, and with the lack of personal commitment to contain this virus, I think it is very likely that we'll be closed at the high school beyond November 30th. Right now it's about staffing, but depending on hospital capacities, depending on other things, depending on whether or not we think that opening the high school contributes to things, I think there's a lot of consideration that we'll need to go into when we reopen the high school. November 30th is the earliest possible date.
Tanya, Clint, anything from you guys?
I guess, and Joe kind of touched on this a little bit. If anyone has a better idea, now's the place to bring it up. Not out in public, not on social media and second guess things that are happening. None of us have a crystal ball. We don't know how this thing is going to play out. I think we need to be flexible. I think we need to adapt. Obviously, if something's not working, but now's the place to discuss it. Not out in public and slamming the district and slamming us on social media about it.
Thank you. Chris and then Charlie.
Sometimes you guys make things like you heighten the tension in the room. No one here is out slamming the districts. Right here, us. Who on this table is, who are at this?
Let's not do.
Well, I'm not aware of that. Also, when you tell us that we have to come up with a plan, we're saying we want to follow the plan we voted on. We did not vote to change the criteria by which we make our decisions. We never voted on that. So it boggles my mind that you would tell Jim that he has to come up with a plan when we already voted on the plan and not following. Secondly, Dr. Hall, the expert, she said clearly that it's not 6 feet is not good enough anymore. That's where we were in August. Do you remember that she had that beautiful metaphor of the thin gloves and 10 degrees below zero? We're not there anymore. We're someplace else. There's no beds, right, for people to go to. So we're getting advice from experts, but the one thing that really concerns me is we're not getting advice from the experts that we need to hear from right now. And that's our teachers. How do they see learning working? How do they see the effects on staff? How do they see, right, the ability for them to effectively keep up what they've already been doing? Nobody at this table is at all qualified to tell us how teachers are going to teach best, right, in this environment right now. They're the ones that have to adjust. They're the ones that have to adapt. So Clint, you say that we're adaptable? We're not even remotely close to the people that are actually doing the work in the classrooms, and our students, by the way. And now, another group that's adapted are those people that sent their kids to school based on the plan that we came up with. And they are now trapped. They can't get their kids out of school. There's no other place for their kids to go, and we're not following the guidelines of the plan that we set out there. So we're not saying that there's anything wrong with the district or that people aren't trying hard enough. We keep bringing up the fact that if we want to make a new plan, we got to do that. And we have to inform people what the criteria are. And we also have to justify why we're overruling our health officials. And we also have to justify we're not reaching out to teachers to find out how they think they can teach best in this environment that we're facing now, with 16.8% of their colleagues out. So it's not criticizing anybody. It's just getting good information so we can make responsible decisions when we come here that is looking out for our students, and it's looking out for our faculty, and it's really looking out for what our job is, which is really trying to put the most effective district out, no matter what the situation.
Thanks, Chris. Charlie and then Joe.
Well, I've got a couple things, but we approved the plan on August 24th. Since August 24th, a few of the board members have continually said, we're not following the plan, this isn't what I agreed to, we're not doing this right, we're not doing that right. Yet every 2 weeks, you get the ability to say, I would like an agenda item to discuss the plan and make changes to the plan. None of you have done that. So if you want to go there, let's go there.
You're the ones changing the plan.
Just a second.
That doesn't make any sense.
I haven't changed the plan. And then secondly, I wish Jim were here to hear this, but the districts around the state that have gone to virtual learning, their case counts amongst kids of school age are not much different than here in Menomonie. Many of them are more, some of them are less. But there's no proof around the state that going to virtual is going to reduce the number of kids that get COVID in our areas. It just, the science isn't there to connect A to B. And then lastly, I'm really tired of people saying the beds are full. We've heard, many of us have talked to different people. For various reasons, people have been transferred to other areas. Lots of different reasons why. That doesn't mean that the beds in the area are full. Are we on the edge of a crisis? There's no question, yes. I don't disagree with that. We need to be careful of that. And that to me is a very important thing we need to really watch. But to say that that is here now, it's just not true. That's all I have.
Joe and then Amy.
So, the plan that the board approved, and it just boggles my mind why our own board members criticize our board, criticize me. The plan the board approved talks about if we reach certain levels, and what it says is that if we reach these levels, mitigation measures will be taken. These mitigation measures may include moving instruction to the blended learning or safer at-home learning environments. Please understand that plans and thresholds may change during the year as more becomes known about COVID-19. So to continue every meeting to generate this false narrative that somehow the school district is not following a plan or changing a plan has really undermined the plan. It's really undermined the efforts of our administration, our teachers, our staff members. And to say that we don't talk to our teachers, or imply that I should say, is absolutely insulting to me after I spent hours on the phone just this last weekend talking to countless staff members to get their take on closing the high school, to get their take on what it's like in their classrooms, to get their take on how it is with their kids. I talked to a teacher today who is at home with COVID. I've talked to a number of teachers who have gone through this. So it is absolutely insulting to suggest that that's not happening in our district. Our district does a great job communicating with our staff. I'm sick of the divisiveness. The pandemic is hard enough. And it's really unfortunate, and it's not fair to the people who are working their tails off to support our kids, to support our families, and to support our medical providers and so many other community institutions. It has to stop.
Amy?
I would love to put that on the agenda to talk about whether we should stay all virtual, face-to-face for some and virtual. You can put that on the agenda. Go ahead. The only thing is that if I put that on the agenda, it's going to be a lot of wasted time because we're divided, just like you said, Joe. So when it comes down to it, it's going to be, again, 6 to 3 or 5 to 4. So that's why I even brought it up, because it's just going to be another big argument. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
You guys be all right if we moved on, unless you had something real pressing on the COVID report?
I would like to talk about staff workload. I have a section in the COVID report about that. So, as we've already well covered, the workload has been immense. Loss of prep time, more supervision, those are real. And then the continuity piece that Jim talked about, that takes more time. It's more work than we've ever had. The reduced class sizes that we have, that the board invested in, have been instrumental. And it has helped, but it's not enough. The extra subs that we hired, we wouldn't be open right now without them. Thank you. But it's not enough. Our staff need time, and I really appreciate the support that I feel. I guess we didn't really talk about it or vote on it, but I appreciate the support that I feel from the board about giving the high school staff time to make this transition. I know it's not easy for families. It's a little easier at the high school level, but it's still not easy for families not to have school on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday this week for the 9th through 12th graders, but it's necessary. Closing the high school will provide us an opportunity to reallocate some staffing, which will be huge. We can take away some of the supervision duties at the other levels. We can cover absences better at the other levels. Many of our high school staff members will still have a full-time job in the virtual experience, but there are some that we can reallocate, and we plan to do that. One of my concerns, I feel better about providing some time for the 9th through 12th grade staff. We need to find a way to carve out time for our K through 8 staff. And while I know that, especially when we talk about the younger elementaries, it's extremely difficult for families when we don't have school. But I think if we provide enough notice and let families know that we're not going to have school at the elementary schools or the middle school, during the Monday and Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. That would provide our staff with a couple days to collaborate, to talk about curriculum, check their pacing, and more than anything, take a breath. So unless there's an objection from the board, I plan to notify our families that on November 23rd and November 24th, we will still have virtual instruction for high school students those 2 days, but at the K through 8 levels, we'll provide those 2 days as work days for our staff members. Does anybody have an objection to that? Thank you.
You guys okay if we move on, or is there somebody want to make another point yet on this one? Okay. Move on to discuss facility access for youth sports.
Dave, before this recent event, this has been on improve, which I don't think any of us feel that that's going to happen. I'm thinking that after Christmas would be the earliest that we would even consider having youth basketball, youth wrestling, those types of things. You know, the county, we don't control the ice arena. The county has allowed youth hockey to, you know, move forward in the ice arena. That's a decision that I guess they make. We don't control the Youth Hockey Association. But in terms of providing school district facilities, any of those higher contact activities, I do not plan to consider those requests until after the first of the year. Does anybody have any concerns with that?
Any discussion?
And it kills me because I know these kids need these activities, but our coaches, it's a full-time job for the coaches. Like Coach Labuda, he has a coach. He has a coach just to talk about COVID protocol. And I've coached enough of that youth basketball. It's not easy. And you have a bunch of parents who are great parents, and they would work their tails off to do it right. But we just don't have control. We don't have the oversight. And I don't think it would be responsible to provide our facilities without it.
Okay, we'll move on. Item 4C, discuss new course proposals for 2021-22.
This really is more informational. I know Brian has been working with the high school. There's not a whole lot of changes being talked about for next year. I appreciate their work on it, but unless there's questions, it's an informational piece for the board.
Jim?
It seemed like most of these were cosmetic, just course changes, not really curriculum changes at all. Is that a fair assessment?
Name changes?
Yes.
Brian, would you want to comment on that?
Yeah, that's correct. In the FIAD level, it actually opens the courses up, removes a few of the prerequisites as well, makes it more accessible to more students, gives them more choices on that.
The math one does, Algebra 2 does go to a virtual.
Yeah, so as far as Algebra 2, we already have that class, but it would open up the possibility of delivering that in a fully online option. We currently have that for geometry. It did not run this year when students signed up, but in talking with the department, the ability to have that type of flexibility, should we need that, should we have more students requesting online to be able to teach that with our teachers versus relying solely on WBS would be an added benefit for us. And depending on how that goes, they would like to entertain the possibility of having that extended to pre-calculus the following year, but that would be a discussion at a later point.
Thanks, Brian. Clint?
Brian, that brings up another thing with the WBS, and I think it's good anytime we can add our own curriculum, because one of the things I've heard, and just anecdotally from a couple of families, is they're not real thrilled with some of the offerings that are out there in WBS, and it's only so good, but I think the more that we can do in-house, probably the better on some of them, or at least another option, just a comment. I guess what feedback have you gotten on it?
Yeah, so one of the things that we looked at a few years ago was what are courses that we're better poised to offer with our staff. One of the nice things about the WBS format is when we have students who want to take a course that maybe we don't have enough interest in to staff it with our own staff members. So we did a few years ago ask every department to identify possible courses that we could offer in an online format with our own staff. Health was one of those, personal financial management was one of those, the geometry one. We had some departments that did go through that process and through some discussion. Ultimately, we made a decision not to move forward at that point in time as well. Civics was another one, social studies as well. So we've done a pretty, I'll say a fairly comprehensive review of that. And this is just our math department taking a look at the next step.
Chris?
And I would just, it would seem like a logical move to start offering some of these classes ourselves online, except once you go down that path, that becomes like a more slippery slope in terms of what our school does and how we teach. Because we've had such an important drive to try and keep our kids in the classroom. Like that's what we know our community needs. We know that's where our strength is. So I think that maybe you misunderstood what I was saying. So I really do not have any critique of anybody. I said we didn't have an understanding where the teachers are with this. You, I'm sure. I said we. But our point is that we want to teach. No, that's true. That's what I said. So the point is that we do things that are really powerful in the classroom. Some things that we don't do is you just can't throw a class online. An online curriculum is a totally different thing. And the greatest teacher, the greatest geometry teacher in the world is not going to be the greatest online teacher in the world. In fact, it's an alienating experience. If you are a great teacher, online teaching probably might not be the place for you. So it's also another opportunity that people have. It seems like it's a good idea, but I would be very careful on moving or making a migration of classes into this online structure because we know where our strengths are, especially the types of students that we have.
Any other comments, questions? Charlie?
By moving these classes to online, we wouldn't eliminate the ability to offer them live, correct? We're just offering it in a different manner, possibly?
That's correct, Charlie. And geometry would be a good example of that. Every class is different. It really comes, in my mind, it really comes down to the teachers. If we have teachers that have an interest in it, that have the skills or want to do it, it usually tends to work out pretty well. There are some courses, depending on whether or not they're needed, whether or not schedule flexibility. Sometimes those courses create a problem or a challenge for students. So there definitely are some advantages to having some classes online, but I agree with Chris. Our bread and butter is in the in-person instruction, and that's why we contracted out with WVS. I think some of it's about WVS, I think more of it's about learning virtually without an instructor, in front of the students, synchronous.
Amy?
What it does is it serves a purpose because a student may not be able to get everything they want.
Right.
In a school year, because there's just not enough room in their schedule to put everything in. So if they can do something online that could take the place of something they could do in person in school that they want to do, and if they can take those, that takes another space, puts another space in there for them.
My kids have done a lot of that in order to stay in music and shop classes. They'll take online classes in the summer just to open up electives. And you're 100% right. Any other comments or questions? Okay, next item on the agenda, discuss 2021-22 school district calendar. Subject to change.
Yeah, this comes up this time every year, and it'd be nice just to say, we're not going to think about next year. Well, actually, it's nice to think about next year, but it's pretty hard to think about what next year's going to be like. But we're thinking about next year going back to normal, and certainly if it's not normal, then like we did this year, we moved the November PD day. I appreciate Jamie. She really took a stab at this and got the initial workings and did a great job with it. But essentially what we did is we built a calendar for next year that is modeled after the calendar. If you recall, especially some of you who were on the board, we had a huge calendar discussion about 5 years ago, really analyzed things from spring break to other things, and at that time I promised I'm never ever going to look at spring break again while I'm in Menomonie. But with the limitations of state law, there's only so much we can do. I do think we need to work on a calendar. We need to have a calendar out there. I know we talked about not wanting to change policy and change things. I do think this is one of those things, though, that we move forward with the calendar. And then in the event that things change at the state level or whatever, I think an adjustment can be made. But I do think families would like to see and staff would like to see what we're thinking for next year. This is an initial draft. I would like to share it with the staff. But before I do that, I'd like to see if board members have any concerns or any suggestions you'd like analyzed with the calendar.
My youngest pointed out that we went from 13 days of Christmas break down to 11.
Well, you tell Brian that fluctuates a little bit based on, you know, and if he wants to go in the middle of June, we could take a lot of time
Well,
off
I
for
don't think
Christmas
he would.
break.
It's funny to me that was the first thing you picked out.
That's funny. That's good.
Any questions or comments?
That always, Christmas always depends on when Christmas is,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
And, you know, one of the ideas, we talked about December 23rd. You know, I'm concerned, and I was concerned this year, the way the calendar this year works out, that staff have to return that Monday after the last day of school. And in my mind, I thought staff would have wanted to wrap it up. And, you know, my own personal opinion is I would rather go to school on December 23rd and then be done Friday, June 3rd with all the professional development stuff. But we had a lot of discussion with the QIC on that last year. And it was pretty clear that that's what the staff wanted to do. So we're going to make the assumption that that's what the staff wants to do again. But we plan to share this with the staff and see if there's input, because it definitely was not unanimous. And but yeah, Jim's got a good point. It really depends on when Christmas falls usually.
Okay, thanks, Joel. Next item, annual free and reduced meals eligibility report.
Yeah, this is concerning, but I guess not surprising. You can see that the number of students that are eligible for free or reduced meals has gone up. It's now 42.5% across the district. It's a 6.9. Is now probably more so than ever. So,
Tricia?
So this is determined specifically from the applications that are filled out?
I believe it's applications and direct certifications.
Any other questions? Okay, move on to item F, set day for mid-year budget meeting.
Yeah, Dave, I'm wondering if this is something the board would like to do again. We've done a few of these. I will say that going into a biennial budget year, I'm not sure how much helpful information we're going to have. I guess the most helpful piece of it is we can recap kind of where things are at, some of the trends. COVID's going to throw all those out though, for at least a couple of years. So we're willing to do it. I don't know if that's our best use of our time and resources at this time, but I also know that it's something that has been well received the last few years. So I guess wondering what the board would like to do with Dave.
Any thoughts? Penny?
What has been our, I can't remember, and I've been here for a few of these now, but what is our usual attendance for the mid-year budget hearing? Is there a way to kind of look back on that?
I'd say less than 3.
I was gonna say, I don't remember if anybody actually came and Mia spoke, and it was us, and we're here all the time anyway, so I don't know, given the situation and what's happening with COVID, I guess I'm up in the air on it. I don't know that it's necessary. Maybe you could do some sort of a written statement that goes out to the community, whether it be through Skyward or whatever the case may be, just kind of recapping between you and Mia versus adding extra time.
Well,
That's
and
just my thought.
the budget is on the agenda a number of times during the year. And as we start the planning process, what we could do is utilize the presentation that has been used in previous years. I think some of the slides will be obsolete based on COVID and such. But we could build upon that presentation and actually just include it as part of our other school board meeting agenda when we talk about planning next year's budget. Would that sound like a good plan, Jim?
Well, I think we should do it. I think it's an accountability piece with the public and the voters and the taxpayers. And the more we're accountable to them, the better, and the more information we give them. It's never been a long presentation. It's been pretty quick and sweet, and who knows, with it being virtual and being online, we may get more people paying attention.
I'd say to do it, but maybe make it virtual. You know, I mean, people could listen in or comment depending as long as we keep it, whatever the health department says, 25 or. You know.
I don't think we'll have that problem, but we can do that.
Anybody else, comments one way or the other? Charlie?
I guess I'm curious, obviously it's mid-year, but why would you not do it early February after the governor has presented his budget to the legislature? Then some parts would be better known at that point, at least what he proposed.
Yeah, it's possible, Charlie. We could wait and do it then. How about if I talk to Leah about it, about the timing, and, you know, a lot of times we do it, you know, an hour before a board meeting, so it's really not a whole lot different than building it into an agenda. It just makes you all come earlier, so that's fine. You know, if we want to call it a separate hearing because it's more accountability or whatever, you know, I get that. We can do that. We can keep it a separate piece, and in terms of timing, I can talk with Leah and find out if it'd be better to wait till February.
I was thinking not necessarily a separate meeting, do it at 5 the night of a regular meeting, but do it in February,
right,
when he submitted the budget.
I understand.
Yeah, it is on the agenda, it's down at 5 o'clock.
Okay, that's good direction. Thank you.
Okay, next item, review items related to next meeting dates, board committee reports. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 23rd. Tricia had asked if there's any consideration or thoughts about possibly going to a virtual format. I guess a little discussion from the board on what you guys think of that, guys and gals. Or if you want to stay as we are.
I was going to ask the same. I was going to ask the same thing. With the trends and stuff going on in high school going virtual, you know, you lead by example, and that might be a good example for us to switch over to virtual again.
The other option too might be to have some in attendance here and some virtual if we want to do it that way as well. For those of us that don't have a good setup at home, myself, I know. But would it make it work either way, you know?
I'm okay with either, except I don't have a good cell service up at my tree stand. That's a week.
Yeah,
Which is when I try and do, but it'll be dark by then.
Yeah, it is Monday at deer season.
Yeah.
And I know I might be 2.5 hours away. But
Okay.
I would fully support going to virtual meetings.
What do you guys think about a blended plan? I mean, for the ones that want to be here.
I'm fine with either.
Tricia, since you brought it up.
I mean, I just brought it up because I'm just watching how things are going and just, I understand the internet issues too. The ones I couldn't ask a question because of my internet, but, you know, I don't know.
Mine was, I didn't have enough bandwidth or something to, I don't know what
But maybe blended is a,
Are there-
whatever works for people, it's fine.
it was.
Are there pieces to this setup that are concerning for anybody? I mean,
Chris?
Yeah, I would just prefer to stay at home. The less moving out, the better. And I think that Jim is right, we should lead by example, and if we have the ability to do that, we can set a good example for how we're dealing with a crisis, I think that's great.
Would you guys be okay if we did a blended plan, or is that a problem? I should ask here for setup with the district stuff.
Yeah, I think that's probably my question is.
Blended can be difficult, no doubt. Because if you and I are in the room and you have your mic on and I have my speakers on and you start to get that echo and all of those kinds of things can be difficult, but it can be done.
We kind of did it today, didn't we, with the swimming, you know.
Jesse?
we'll do whatever the board wants. It will require a lot of work to either go virtual or blended.
Do we vote?
And we-
I
I'm gonna say we either go all or nothing. Either we're all here or we're all virtual.
Well,
That's kind of my thought. That would hopefully help part of the draw.
That would definitely simplify things. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Keep it
Simple,
simple.
simple is good.
Keep it simple.
but I have a question then. So let's say one of us ends up with the Rona, and we end up having to stay at home. Do we have, I mean, I know I could call into the meeting, but that also seems kind of difficult. Is there a way for one of us to participate? Maybe not all of us, but one of us or two of us or whatever the situation is, so that it's not that we're totally out of it?
Yes, essentially that is a blended type of plan, isn't it? And we have had it before with board members not here. It is easier on our end to manage a phone call and have the board member participate with the voting and such, utilizing board docs. However, we can try to do the virtual and set a computer up and turn it so people can see the screen, or put it up there like we did with the community communications. That's the first time we've done that. I think it went pretty smooth. So we can do it. I'm not saying we can't do it. It's just, it's gonna be more work for our tech department, and hopefully it goes smooth.
Then we just go week to week and just, I don't know. I don't want to make it a lot difficult.
Well, I do, personally, I think we need to have that ability, because if we're playing the odds, some of us are gonna get it at some point. So I mean, I don't want you to come here if you haven't, so it's kind of, I mean, seriously, like have a phone call or something, we need that ability, and I'm not trying to be difficult, just.
Yeah, we have the ability, and we've done it with the phone for sure.
The phone would be a lot simpler than trying to do the video and everything else.
That thing tonight went just slick. That was great. Great transition, all the voices were there. We didn't get any kind of weird echo or anything, whatever that was, I thought that was great. It's nice to see the faces, get more of a contact situation going on.
I will say though, if we go virtual, we still have to set up the building, because there are people in our community that may not have virtual access. So, we still have to set up a viewing room, and, there's still gonna be things to manage there with our posting and things like that. It's not as simple. It can be done, for sure. It's just not as simple as I think as some people probably think.
All I know is we did have one virtual meeting when we started, that didn't go very good.
That was a mess.
So bad.
The one reason Chris said it went well tonight is because none of those people were in the same space.
Right.
They were all working from their own computer.
Yeah, I totally got you there.
Penny?
When we all ran for office, we signed on to show up the second and fourth Mondays of the month and for any special meetings. So I guess if I signed on for this gig, I plan to be here then unless I have health issues, which can happen, or a family vacation, those kinds of things. I think in my 5 years, I've missed maybe 3 meetings, and a couple of those were at national convention. So I signed up to be here. I'm perfectly happy sitting here.
I think the thing would be is if there are people who do want to have virtual option, if there's any problem with accommodating them. If there aren't any problems with that, then I would be happy to call in on a phone if you would prefer that. I'll do whatever it is to make the tech easier. That I just happen to think that would happen today. It was just like that looked like the way to do it.
We have multiple phone calls at once, if we have 2 people who want to call in.
Yeah, we can put it on conference mode.
I guarantee you our meeting is going to be shorter. So entertain that idea.
Can't.
I was gonna say, I've done an awful lot of Zoom meetings in the last 6 months, and some of them for the Wildlife Federation. I mean, we've got 40 people at a meeting all over the state, and most of them make me look young, so their computer skills are not good, but we still managed to pull it off, so I mean, it's doable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Absolutely
do
doable.
meetings, my students, individual and then group meetings and workshops and.
We can definitely do it.
I guess, personally, I'd like to have the meeting here, and if you want remote access or attend that way.
It would be nice if we had some planning time though.
Yeah.
Finding out the day of the meeting that people aren't planning to come unless it's an emergency makes it more difficult.
Well,
But
can you look into it, have a chat with, Katie, right?
I already know we can, Jim, and if people want to designate they want to go virtual, we'll just do it.
Well, I guess if the high school is virtual, we should be just lead by example.
Well, the elementary schools and middle schools aren't, so. Just
Well,
what the high school.
they will be. The way the trends are.
But they aren't right now, so.
They will be.
Well, there are things that happen, like when the students come up and you need the microphone, and like, not everyone here is the same as everybody else. There's people that have different views of what they think their risk tolerance is, and other people just can't because of the situation at home. So it really doesn't come down to, I mean, I don't think anyone's trying to skip out. I mean, it's just like there are probably some people who are better served by not being in this environment, and there are plenty of people to have pause for caution given some of the interactions, like handing out tapes. Like there is things that happen here that.
So every board member, maybe let me know by the end of the week. Does that sound good, Dave?
Sure.
And now, if an emergency happens, we'll work through it, for sure. But if you want to have a virtual setup, please let me know by the end of the week so that we can plan for the following board meeting.
Fair enough?
Perfect.
Okay, that's all we got.
Hey.
Motion to adjourn. Amy, second? Second. Chris, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. The sign is selling fruit.